One Last Cigarette, Episode 1, The Man Who Smoked Alone. Victor Brennan's study was the sort of room that tried very hard to look like it had never heard of fear. The shelves were lined with leather-bound books, expensive, dignified, and rarely opened. A painting of the coastline hung above the fireplace, as though the room wished to pretend it belonged to the ocean instead of the hills. Even the chairs had a disciplined posture, their polished arms gleaming faintly under the warm lamps. The house, perched above the city, wore wealth the way some men walk alone, a little too heavily, as if it were both pleasure and armor. Victor Brennan sat behind his desk with a tumbler of scotch he had not touched in 10 minutes. He was 58, a man who had worked hard to look younger than his money, but tonight the money was losing. His face was pale in a way that suggested his heart condition was not merely a line in his medical chart but a daily negotiation. His eyes flickered between the door and the drawer on the right side of his desk, as though he was trying not to think about what he had placed inside it. Across from him stood Martin Voss. Martin did not sit. He stood near the drinks cart with the mild impatience of a man who disliked furniture that did not know its place. He was the sort of businessman who could make even silence sound expensive. His suit was dark and immaculate, the cuffs precise, the tie centered as if it had been measured by an engineer. He had the clean, confident hands of someone who rarely did anything that could stain them. "Victor," Martin said, and even the name came out polished, "you're letting this become theatrical." Victor's fingers tightened slightly around the glass, though he still did not drink. "Theatrical," he repeated. "You stole from the company. $3 million. And you're worried about theater." Martin's expression did not change so much as settle. "You keep using that word, stole. It's emotional. It's crude. It doesn't describe what happened." "What happened," Victor said quietly, "is that you took money that wasn't yours." Martin tipped his head, the way one might react to a child insisting the moon belonged to him. "I moved funds to keep us afloat. You call it theft because it makes you feel morally taller. But you're not taller, Victor. You're just angry." Victor's eyes flashed, and for a moment the old partnership showed in the familiar rhythm of argument, two men who had once fought side by side now fighting each other with the same trained precision. "I hired a forensic accountant," Victor said. "Sheila Grant. She gave me the report yesterday." That did something to Martin, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Only the smallest pause in the breath, the faintest narrowing of the eyes. It lasted half a second, and it would have meant nothing to most people. But Victor noticed it, because Victor had spent 2 decades reading Martin's pauses for meaning. "Sheila Grant," Martin repeated softly. "So you've decided to make this official." "I've decided to make it honest." "You think those are the same thing," Martin said, "and that's been your flaw for years." Victor leaned forward. "Tomorrow morning I call the board. I call my lawyer. Then I call the police." Martin's smile came then, not wide, not cruel, just faintly indulgent, as if Victor had described a romantic fantasy. "And the merger?" Martin asked. Victor's jaw tightened. "The merger can go to hell." Martin put his glass down on the cart, carefully, as though even the sound of it touching the surface might be judged. "You will destroy the deal," he said. "You will destroy the company. You will destroy everything we built, and you'll do it because you want to feel clean." Victor's eyes hardened. "I want to be clean." "Clean is for people who don't sign contracts," Martin said, and there was something almost weary in his voice, like a man explaining gravity to someone who insisted on floating. Victor stood up abruptly. The motion made him sway, just slightly, and he steadied himself with a hand on the desk. "Get out," he said. Martin looked at him. "Victor, get out of my house." The words hung in the air like a line that could not be unsaid. Martin did not move at once. He took a breath, as if considering whether to push, then decided against it. He walked toward the door, and for a moment Victor's shoulders relaxed, until Martin stopped, turned, and looked back with mild curiosity. "You know," Martin said, "years ago you used to smoke those imported things. Sobranies. Like you were a film star." Victor's nostrils flared. "I quit." "Yes," Martin said, nodding. Doctor's orders. The heart. The domestic sermon. You became very disciplined. Don't talk about my wife, Victor snapped. I'm not talking about her, Martin said. I'm talking about you. You quit everything. Smoking. Drinking. Fun. Now you want to quit being successful too. Victor's voice dropped. Leave. Martin's gaze slid, almost casually, to the right-hand drawer of the desk. It was a glance that would have been meaningless if Victor hadn't been thinking about that drawer all evening. Victor followed the gaze, and his stomach tightened. Martin's tone became softer, and therefore more dangerous. Open it. Victor stared. What? Open the drawer, Victor. I'm not playing games. No, Martin said. You're losing one. Victor's voice rose. Get out. Martin did not shout. He simply stepped toward the desk, reaching. Victor moved instinctively to block him. Don't touch. Martin's hand slid past Victor's, and the drawer opened with a quiet, smooth sound. Inside, wrapped in felt, lay a .38 revolver. Victor's throat tightened. That's not. Martin lifted the gun with an almost clinical ease. Registered to you, he said calmly. Purchased 3 months ago. Victor's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with his heart. I hate guns. So do I, Martin said. That's why I keep mine where nobody sees it. Victor's mouth opened, then closed. His breath sounded wrong. Martin held the gun low, not pointing it yet, but the mere fact of it changed the room. The study, with its leather books and polite lamps, suddenly looked like what it truly was, a place where people made decisions that ruined lives. Victor swallowed. Put it down. Martin's eyes were steady. Sit down, Victor. No. Sit, Martin said, still not raised, still controlled, but now the word had a hard edge, like metal under velvet. Victor stared at him for a moment, then slowly Saturday. His hands were on the desk, palms flat, as if he could anchor himself to the wood. Martin stepped closer. Now, he said, we're going to do this carefully. Victor's voice shook. What are you planning? Martin considered him for a moment, and then, almost gently, said, something neat. Victor's eyes darted to the phone on the desk. Martin noticed the movement without turning his head. Don't, Martin said. Victor froze. Martin's gaze remained calm. Tomorrow morning you were going to make calls. You were going to take the steering wheel out of my hands. Victor's voice was thin. You did this to yourself. Martin nodded once, as if agreeing with a point in a debate. Perhaps. But I'm still here, and I still have a future. And you, he looked down at the gun in his hand as if it were merely an unfortunate tool. You're becoming an obstacle. Victor whispered, my wife. Patricia will be fine, Martin said. She'll inherit. People will send flowers. It will be a tasteful tragedy. Victor's eyes filled with a sudden, desperate clarity. She has asthma, he said. She hates smoke. She can't even. Martin blinked slowly. Then we'll keep it clean. Victor's voice cracked. Martin, don't do this. For the first time, something flickered behind Martin's eyes. Not remorse, something closer to irritation, as if Victor's pleading were inconvenient. I didn't want it to be like this, Martin said quietly. You forced me. Victor let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded like pain. I forced you to steal. I forced you to lie. Martin stepped forward and raised the gun. I forced you to survive, he said, and then he fired. Victor jerked, a sharp breath leaving him, and then he folded forward, collapsing onto the desk. The Scotch glass toppled, rolling on its side, spilling a slow amber pool across the wood as if the room itself were bleeding in miniature. Martin stood still, watching the body settle, listening to the last sounds Victor Brennan made in the world. Then Martin moved. He did not run, he did not panic. He adjusted his cuff. He glanced at the window. He walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an elegant cigarette case. He slid out a cigarette, Sobranie cocktail, black paper, gold tip, absurdly stylish. He lit it. He did not smoke it. He placed it into the ashtray, carefully, upright, as if he were positioning a prop for a photograph. He took out the gold-plated lighter again and wiped it with a handkerchief until it shone. He hesitated, then placed the lighter not near the ashtray but closer to the window, slightly out of place, close enough to be found, but far enough to look accidental. He looked at Victor's body again, then at the cigarette. He checked his watch. He turned and walked out of the study. In the hallway, he paused briefly, listening. The house was quiet. Patricia was upstairs. She would come down when she heard a sound. Or when it was convenient. Or when she was meant to. Martin Voss walked through the house like a man leaving a hotel. He closed the front door behind him without slamming it. And Victor Brennan remained at his desk, dead, with a cigarette burning beside him, like time itself had been hired to lie. Lieutenant Columbo arrived at the Brennan home with his raincoat collar slightly turned up, as though he had walked through weather even if the night had been clear. He had the look of a man who had been fighting with traffic for hours and lost. His car, small, old, faintly apologetic, sat at the curb as if embarrassed to be in such a neighborhood. Inside, the house looked exactly as one would expect a multimillion-dollar life to look after death. Still beautiful, still clean, still insisting nothing truly ugly could happen here. Sergeant Hayes met him in the entryway. Hayes was efficient, bright-eyed, and entirely too neat for homicide. He had the kind of face that trusted procedures. "Lieutenant," Hayes said, relieved. "Thank you for coming. Victims Victor Brennan. 58. CEO of Brennan Industries. Wife found him about an hour ago." Columbo nodded, blinking slowly, taking in the marble floors, the expensive silence. "That's tough," he said. "Wife, she doing okay?" "The doctor gave her something," Hayes said. "She's upstairs. Resting." "Good," Columbo said. "Good. You never want anybody to have to, you know." Hayes started walking toward the study, and Columbo followed, his shoes sounding out of place on the polished floor. In the doorway of the study, the scene waited with the patience of tragedy. Victor Brennan sat slumped forward at his desk. Blood darkened his shirt. The gun was near his hand. The room was otherwise remarkably tidy. Hayes gestured. Single gunshot to the chest. Gun fell from his hand. Powder residue suggests close range. Locked room situation. Study door was locked. Window secured. No sign of struggle. Columbo stood in the doorway, looking, not at the body, not at the blood, but at the desk. He stared at the cigarette in the ashtray. He moved closer, slowly, as if walking toward something fragile. He frowned faintly. That's still burning." Hayes nodded. "Mrs. Brennan says it was when she opened the door." Columbo leaned in slightly, watching the ash form. His face carried a mild expression of concern, as though he were watching a little disaster in slow motion. "You know," he said, "I used to smoke. Not like a chimney or anything. Just, when I was nervous. My wife, she hated it. She'd say, 'Frank, you're gonna smell like a bus station.' She was right. She's always right." Hayes waited, not sure where this was going. Columbo looked at the ashtray again. "How long does a cigarette burn if you don't puff on it?" Hayes blinked. Forensics said about 7 minutes for this brand. Maybe 8. Columbo nodded, absorbing it. 7 minutes, he murmured. So if she found him at what time? Hayes checked his notes. She says 10:47. Columbo's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Not suspicious, just thoughtful. And it was burning. Yes. Columbo nodded again. So it would mean the time of death would be around 10:40. Hayes shrugged. That's what it suggests. Columbo's gaze wandered across the desk. Papers. A pen. A glass on its side with scotch spilled like a stain. He noticed how clean everything was, cleaner than grief usually allowed. Then he noticed the ashtray again. "It's a nice ashtray," Columbo said. "Crystal." Hayes looked at him. "Yeah." Columbo's tone was mild. "It's very clean." Hayes frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Columbo lifted a hand, apologetic. "Oh, nothing. Nothing. It's just, a man smokes, there's usually a little ash. Maybe a butt or two. You know, people aren't tidy when they're alone." Hayes glanced at the ashtray, then back at Columbo. "Maybe he cleaned it." Columbo nodded. Sure. People clean things when they're about to kill themselves. Sometimes they do. My cousin Ralph, he was very tidy. He'd iron his undershirts. But this," he gestured vaguely, "this feels, I don't know, polite." Hayes shifted. "Lieutenant, it's a suicide. Locked room. Gun in hand. No struggle." Columbo looked at the body now, then back to the cigarette. He did not contradict Hayes. He never fought directly with certainty. He simply walked around it until it got dizzy. "Okay," Columbo said softly. "Okay. Let's talk to Mrs. Brennan when she's ready." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Patricia Brennan appeared in the doorway. She was dressed in black already, perhaps a robe, perhaps something she had thrown on quickly, but it looked too composed to be entirely accidental. She was attractive, late 40s, hair arranged in a way that suggested she had practiced looking unbroken. Her eyes were red, but the rest of her face held itself together with the discipline of someone who had learned that emotion was best expressed in controlled quantities. "Who are you?" she asked. Columbo turned immediately, gentle. "Oh, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Columbo. I didn't mean to disturb you. Sergeant Hayes said you were resting." "I can't rest," Patricia said. Her voice trembled just enough to be believable. "My husband he's dead." "I'm very sorry," Columbo said, and he meant it. I know it's terrible." "They're saying he killed himself," Patricia said. "That's impossible. Victor would never." Columbo raised a hand, soothing. "Mrs. Brennan, I don't want to trouble you with questions right now. Maybe tomorrow, when you're feeling." "No," she said sharply. "Ask now. I want whoever did this caught." Columbo paused a fraction. "Did this?" Patricia's eyes flicked toward the body, then away. "Victor didn't own a gun. He hated guns." Hayes spoke, almost defensive. "There's a registered firearm in his name. Purchased 3 months ago." Patricia's face tightened. "That's not possible. He never told me." Columbo nodded slowly. "People keep secrets," he said gently. "Even from the ones they love." Patricia's voice lowered. "Victor wasn't a secret man." Columbo glanced at the cigarette again. "Mrs. Brennan, when you found him, you said the cigarette was still burning." "Yes," she said quickly. "The smoke was rising. It made me cough." Columbo tilted his head. "Does your husband smoke?" "No," she said. "He quit years ago. Doctor's orders. Heart condition. He did it for me. I have asthma." Columbo's eyes softened. "Oh," he said. "Asthma. That's rough." Patricia's voice grew sharper. "He would never smoke in that room. Not with me in the house." Columbo nodded. "Was anyone else here tonight?" She hesitated, just a fraction, then answered. "Just Victor and me. And Martin." "Martin?" Columbo repeated, as if hearing a common name. "Martin Voss," she said. "Victor's business partner. He came by around 9. They had drinks in the study." Columbo nodded, as though this explained something that had been nagging him. "How long did he stay?" "An hour," Patricia said. "Maybe. He left around 10. I said goodbye at the door myself." Columbo's tone remained gentle. "And after that?" Victor's eyes were focused on nothing. Victor said he had paperwork. He wanted to be alone. I went upstairs to read. Columbo nodded. And then you heard. Patricia swallowed. Around 10:45, I heard a loud sound. Her voice cracked. Like something heavy. Columbo's gaze remained steady. And you came downstairs? Yes. The study door was locked. I had to get the spare key from the kitchen. Columbo's eyebrows lifted slightly. There's a spare key. Patricia nodded. Yes. Where do you keep it? In the top drawer by the sink. Columbo nodded as if filing it under ordinary domestic facts, like salt and pepper. Okay. Patricia's voice rose again. I unlocked the door and I saw him. Blood. The gun. And that cigarette, still burning. Columbo nodded, his face full of sympathetic patience. You did everything right, Mrs. Brennan. Her eyes filled again. Please, she whispered. Find out what happened. Columbo's voice was soft. I'll do my best. That's a promise. Patricia stepped away, and Hayes leaned in. You think it's murder? Hayes asked quietly. Columbo looked around the study again. I think something doesn't add up, he said. A man who hates guns buys one. A man who quits smoking lights up. A room that's too tidy. And a cigarette that burns, at exactly the right moment. Hayes frowned. What's your theory? Columbo shook his head. Oh, I don't have a theory. Not yet. I got something worse than a theory. What's that? Columbo looked at the cigarette again. I got a feeling, he said. And my feelings, they don't quit. Martin Voss lived in a modern apartment that looked like it had been designed by a man who disliked furniture with opinions. Everything was straight lines, cold glass, hard surfaces. It was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. When Columbo arrived, Martin opened the door with the polite impatience of someone who had already rehearsed being interrupted. Yes. Martin said. Can I help you? Columbo smiled apologetically. Mr. Voss. Lieutenant Columbo. Sorry to bother you so late. Martin's expression shifted into practiced concern. Is this about Victor? Columbo nodded. You heard. Patricia called me, Martin said. Half an hour ago. She was hysterical. I can barely believe it. Columbo nodded, stepping in when invited, looking around at the expensive emptiness. Nice place you got, he said. Modern. My wife likes this kind of thing. Me, I get nervous when I can't find a cushion. Martin offered him a drink. Columbo refused. Then, with the mild persistence of a man asking for directions, he began. I understand you were at the Brennan house earlier, Columbo said. Yes, Martin said. Business. What time did you arrive? Around 9, Martin said smoothly. Maybe a few minutes after. And you left around 10. Approximately, Martin said, still smooth. I didn't check the exact time. Columbo nodded sympathetically. Yeah, I never check the exact time either. My wife says I'm allergic to schedules. Martin smiled thinly. How was Victor? Columbo asked. His mood. Stressed, Martin said. Merger pressure. But nothing unusual. Columbo leaned slightly, as if confiding. Did he seem suicidal? Martin's eyebrows lifted. Absolutely not. Victor was a fighter. Columbo nodded. Mrs. Brennan mentioned you had drinks. Yes, Martin said. Scotch. Columbo's eyes drifted to Martin's hands. Did Victor smoke while you were there? Martin's tone turned mildly surprised. Smoke? No. Victor quit smoking years ago. Columbo nodded. You're sure? Positive. Columbo scratched his head, a little embarrassed. That's interesting, he said, because when Mrs. Brennan found him, there was a lit cigarette on the desk. Martin's face registered mild confusion, very controlled. That is strange. Columbo nodded. Yeah. Strange. Mr. Voss, do you smoke? Occasionally, Martin said. Columbo's eyes widened slightly, as though this was new information. Oh. What brand? Martin shrugged. I don't have a particular brand. Whatever's available. Columbo nodded, as if accepting a dull answer. Then he asked, in the same tone, when you left at 10, Victor was alive? Yes. And you drove straight home? Yes, Martin said. Well, I stopped for gas. Columbo's eyes brightened. Oh, gas. Where? The Shell on Mulholland, Martin said without hesitation. Columbo nodded. Did you pay with a card? Martin's smile returned. Cash. I prefer cash. Columbo nodded again. Sure. Sure. He looked down at his hands, as though embarrassed to ask the next part. This merger, Columbo said. 40 million, right? Martin's posture straightened. Yes. And you and Victor own the company 50-50? Yes. Columbo nodded slowly. So if Victor dies, Patricia inherits his shares? Martin nodded. Yes. Columbo's face remained gentle. And the merger can still proceed? Yes, Martin said, a little stiff. But I didn't kill my partner for it, Lieutenant. Columbo lifted his hands. Oh no, no, no. I wasn't implying. I'm just trying to understand. They say follow the money, you know? I don't say that. People say it. Martin exhaled, controlled. Is there anything else? Columbo hesitated, then smiled. Well, just one more thing. Martin's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes. Columbo's tone was mild, almost friendly. That cigarette on Victor's desk. Forensics will tell us the brand. If it's something unusual, something imported, then it might tell us who brought it into the house. Martin's expression remained composed. I suppose it might. Columbo nodded, satisfied. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Voss. As he turned to leave, Martin spoke, polite. I hope you find out what happened. For Patricia's sake. Columbo looked back. Yeah, he said softly. Me too. The next morning, Columbo arrived at the station looking as if he had slept in his clothes and argued with his tie. Sergeant Hayes met him with a folder. Forensics came back on the cigarette, Hayes said. Columbo blinked. That was fast. You told them to rush it. Columbo nodded. Yeah. When it's something small, it's usually big. Hayes opened the folder. Brand is Sobranie cocktail. Imported. Expensive. Not common. Columbo's eyes narrowed. Sobranie, he repeated softly, tasting the word as if it might be poison. And there's more, Hayes said. The cigarette was lit after Brennan was already dead. Columbo stared. After. Hayes nodded. The burn pattern, the ash angle, someone lit it and placed it. It didn't burn naturally from his hand. Columbo's mouth tightened. He did not look surprised. He looked validated, as if the world had finally admitted to lying. So it was staged, Columbo murmured. Looks like it. Columbo stared out the window for a long moment. Then he turned back. Sergeant, he said quietly, if somebody lit that cigarette after he died, then that cigarette wasn't a habit. Hayes frowned. What was it? Columbo's eyes were distant. It was a timer, he said. 7 minutes. Hayes's face tightened. You think the time of death is wrong? Columbo nodded. Yeah. And that means? That means the man who says he left at 10 might have left after Victor was already dead, Columbo said. Hayes exhaled. So Martin Voss. Columbo didn't say the name immediately. He rarely did. Names made things too direct, too neat. Columbo liked to let people hang themselves with their own neatness. He said only, "Somebody wanted us to believe something, and they used a cigarette to do it." Hayes leaned forward. "What now?" Columbo's eyes returned to that word again, that expensive lie. "Sobranie," he said. "Now we find out who smokes like a movie star." Columbo returned to the Brennan house that afternoon, not because he needed to see the body again. He had seen enough bodies to last a lifetime, but because he needed to see the room without the shock around it. He needed to see the quiet details that grief usually trampled. Patricia Brennan met him in the living room, composed but brittle. "Lieutenant," she said, "do you have any news?" Columbo smiled gently. "We're working, Mrs. Brennan." She held her hands together tightly. "They said suicide," she said again, as if repeating it could make it less insulting to the dead. Columbo nodded. "Sometimes things look like something until they don't." Patricia swallowed. "Did Martin say anything to you? Anything unusual?" Columbo looked at her for a beat. It was a simple question, but it carried something, an urgency that could be grief or something else. "He said he was shocked," Columbo said mildly. "He said he hoped we'd find out what happened." Patricia's face tightened. "He was always good with words," she said. Columbo nodded, as though agreeing with a harmless observation. Then he asked, gently, "Mrs. Brennan, your husband, was he left-handed?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes." Columbo nodded. "Writes with the left. Eats with the left. That kind of thing." Patricia stared. "Why are you asking me that?" Columbo smiled apologetically. "Oh, it's nothing. It's just, sometimes the little things, they tell you who a person was. And a case like this, it's all little things." Patricia's voice tightened. "Little things like a cigarette." Columbo nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "Like a cigarette." Patricia's eyes flicked away, then back. "Victor hated smoke," she said, a little too quickly. "He quit for me." Columbo nodded again. "Asthma," he said. "I remember." She forced a small smile. "Yes." Columbo leaned forward slightly, his voice still gentle. "Mrs. Brennan, when you opened the study door, was the air thick? From the smoke?" Patricia's face tightened. "Yes," she said. "It was horrible. I couldn't breathe." Columbo nodded thoughtfully. "So if somebody lit a cigarette in that room, and kept the room closed, the smoke would build." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" Columbo lifted his hands. "Nothing. Nothing. I'm just picturing it." Patricia looked away again, as if the picture hurt. Columbo stood up, adjusting his coat. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, "do you mind if I take another look at the kitchen drawer? Where you keep the spare key?" She looked startled. "The key?" Columbo nodded. "Just routine." Patricia hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." In the kitchen, Columbo opened the top drawer by the sink. There it was, the spare key, placed in the same spot where a person might place a spoon, without thinking. Columbo held it for a moment. It was a small object. Innocent. Useful. And like many useful things, it could ruin lives. He set it back carefully, exactly where he found it. "Thank you," he said. Patricia's voice behind him was soft. "Lieutenant, do you think Martin did it?" Columbo turned slowly. He studied her face with the calm patience of someone who had learned never to answer the question that was asked. "I think Martin Voss is a man who likes things neat," Columbo said. "And your husband's death is too neat." Patricia's voice trembled. "Then he killed him." Columbo's eyes stayed gentle. "Mrs. Brennan, I don't know that yet." "But you think it?" Columbo sighed quietly. "I think somebody staged something," he said. "And the person who staged it wanted us to feel satisfied too quickly." Patricia looked at him, confused. "Why?" Columbo's voice was almost conversational. "Because satisfied detectives stop looking." That evening, Columbo sat in his car outside Chapman's Fine Tobacco, Beverly Hills. It was not a place he belonged. The storefront was elegant, softly lit, the kind of shop where a man might buy a cigar the way he bought a watch, lest he use it then to display it. Columbo checked his coat pockets, as if searching for courage. Then he got out and walked inside. Mr. Chapman was behind the counter, neat as a ledger. He looked up with mild alarm at the sight of a rumpled detective. "Good evening," Chapman said carefully. "May I assist you?" Columbo smiled. "Yes, sir. Lieutenant Columbo, LAPD." Chapman blinked. "Oh dear." Columbo nodded. "Yeah. Oh dear. I wanted to ask you about cigarettes." Chapman's posture tightened. "We have many varieties." Columbo nodded. "Do you sell Sobranie cocktail?" Chapman's eyes flickered. "Yes," he said. "Quite popular." Columbo's face remained mild. "Popular with who? I mean, what kind of customer buys a cigarette like that?" Chapman allowed himself a faint smile. "A customer with refined taste." Columbo nodded as if this confirmed something. "Refined," he repeated. "Okay. Do you keep records?" Chapman hesitated. "We respect client confidentiality." Columbo nodded immediately. "Of course. Of course. I respect it too. But this is a murder investigation." Chapman's face stiffened. "Murder." Columbo leaned slightly forward, his tone gentle. "I'm not asking you to gossip. Just, did Martin Voss purchase Sobranie cocktails recently?" Chapman's eyes widened a fraction. "Mr. Voss, yes. He is a regular customer." Columbo nodded, pleased not to show it. "How regular?" "A carton every 2 weeks, Chapman said. Columbo blinked. "A carton?" "Yes." Columbo looked slightly impressed. That's a lot of smoking." Chapman gave a polite little shrug. "Some men have habits." Columbo nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Habits." "When was his last purchase?" Columbo asked. Chapman reached for a ledger. 2 days ago. Monday afternoon." Columbo's eyes narrowed slightly. 2 days ago." Chapman nodded. "He bought 2 cartons." Columbo's eyebrows lifted. 2. Chapman nodded. "He said he was traveling." Columbo's tone remained casual. "Traveling where?" "London," Chapman said. "Business." Columbo nodded as if making mental notes about a place he would never visit without a police case. "Did he pay cash or card?" Chapman hesitated. "Card." Columbo smiled gently. "Would you mind showing me the receipt?" Chapman produced it. Columbo read it slowly, lips moving slightly as if the numbers were difficult. 2 cartons. Sobranie cocktail. Paid by card. Columbo looked up. "Thank you," he said. "You've been a big help." Chapman swallowed. "Lieutenant, is Mr. Voss a suspect?" Columbo raised a hand. "Oh no, no. I'm just checking everything. In cases like this, you check everything. My wife says I check everything even when I don't have to. She says I could find a mistake in a perfect painting." Chapman didn't smile. Columbo added, gently, "If anybody asks you about this, you call me." Chapman nodded, uneasy. Columbo left the shop and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the city lights below as though they were distant and irrelevant. Then he got back into his car. He did not start it immediately. He stared at the receipt again. 2 cartons. 2 days before the death. An expensive lie prepared in advance. Columbo exhaled softly. "Okay," he murmured to himself, "so he didn't just smoke. He planned." The next day, Columbo returned to Martin Voss, this time at his office. It was a sleek building where even the elevators felt superior. The receptionist looked at Columbo's coat as if it might leave a stain on the air. "Mr. Voss has a meeting," she said. Columbo smiled politely. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm here. I just need 1 minute. She sighed with the resignation of someone forced to interact with the public. Then she called inside. Martin Voss emerged moments later, smiling in a way that suggested he was used to being obeyed. Lieutenant, Martin said. This is becoming persistent. Columbo nodded, apologetic. I know. My wife says I'm persistent too. She says if I ever get reincarnated, I'll come back as a mosquito. Martin's smile tightened. What is it now? Columbo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small evidence bag containing a gold-plated lighter. Martin's eyes flickered. Recognize this? Columbo asked. Martin's face remained composed. Yes, he said. That's my lighter. Columbo nodded. Initials and everything. Martin's jaw tightened. I must have dropped it at Victor's house. Columbo nodded sympathetically. Sure. Could happen. The funny thing is, we found it near the window. Martin shrugged. I don't remember going near the window. Columbo nodded, as if the memory lapse were perfectly normal. And it was wiped clean. Martin lifted his chin slightly. I polish it. Columbo smiled. You must be a very neat man. Martin's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant, if you're implying. Oh no, Columbo said quickly. No. I'm not implying anything. He paused, then added softly, it's funny. A neat man, in a case that's too neat. Martin's voice sharpened. I told you the truth. Columbo nodded. Sure. He looked down at the lighter, then back up at Martin. Mr. Voss, do you smoke? Martin's lips tightened. Occasionally. Columbo nodded. What brand? Martin's eyes remained steady. Whatever's available. Columbo smiled faintly. That's funny, he said. Because the cigarette at the scene, Sobranie cocktail, doesn't sound like whatever's available. It sounds like something a man chooses. Martin's voice was calm, but the calm was now strained. I've heard of Sobranie. Columbo nodded. You ever smoke them? Martin's pause was slightly longer than the last. Sometimes, he said. Columbo's eyes softened, as if he had just been given a gift. Where do you buy them? Martin hesitated, then said, a tobacconist in Beverly Hills. Columbo nodded. Chapman's. Martin stared. You went there. Columbo smiled apologetically. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's my job. My wife says my job is why I forget birthdays. Martin's jaw tightened. Lieutenant, I have nothing more to say. Columbo nodded quickly. Sure. I just wanted to clear something up. Martin turned slightly, signaling the conversation was over. Columbo added, almost as an afterthought, just one more thing. Martin stopped, despite himself. What? Columbo's tone was mild. If you're only an occasional smoker, why do you carry such a fancy lighter everywhere? Martin's eyes narrowed. Habit. Columbo nodded. Yeah, he said softly. Habits take years. Martin's expression did not change, but something behind it tightened, like a string pulled too far. Columbo smiled, stepped back, and left. He had not arrested Martin Voss. He had not accused him. He had done something far worse. He had made Martin feel noticed. That night, Columbo sat with Sergeant Hayes in a quiet corner of the station, going over the timeline again. Patricia says Voss left at 10, Hayes said. Neighbor didn't report anything. Columbo nodded. Yeah. Hayes tapped the file. We've got the cigarette staged. The brand ties to Voss. The lighter ties to Voss. But we need something that puts him in the room at the moment of death. Columbo nodded slowly. Yeah. We need one thing that's not neat. Hayes frowned. What do you mean? Columbo leaned back, eyes distant. If you stage something, You think you can control it. But you can't control people. People, they do little things. They forget. They fidget. They leave something behind they didn't mean to. Hayes nodded slowly. So we look for what he didn't mean. Columbo smiled faintly. Exactly. Hayes looked down at the report. Should we bring Voss in? Columbo shook his head. Not yet. Hayes frowned. Why not? Columbo's voice was calm. Because right now he's comfortable, he said. He thinks he's ahead. And when a man like Martin Voss thinks he's ahead, he starts being generous. Hayes didn't understand. Columbo added, he starts making mistakes. Patricia Brennan did not sleep. She sat in her bedroom with the lights dimmed and her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. The house felt different now, like a place that had been violated. Even the expensive furniture looked uncertain. Downstairs, the study door remained closed. The crime scene tape was gone, but the room still carried the smell of blood and smoke like an accusation. Patricia rose slowly, walked to the hallway, and stopped near the stairs. She listened. The house was quiet. She whispered to herself, it was supposed to be perfect. Then she turned back, went to bed, and closed the door. The next morning, Columbo returned to the Brennan house with a small plastic bag and an expression of mild embarrassment, as if he were about to ask for a favor at the wrong time. Patricia met him in the hallway. Lieutenant, she said. Any progress? Columbo nodded slightly. We're working. Patricia's eyes searched his face. You've been to see Martin. Columbo blinked, as if surprised she knew. Oh, yeah. I stopped by. Patricia's voice tightened. And? Columbo shrugged in his gentle way. He was very cooperative. Patricia's lips tightened. Cooperative. Columbo nodded. Yes, Patricia stared at him. What does that mean? Columbo smiled apologetically. It means, he answered questions quickly. Patricia's gaze sharpened. Too quickly. Columbo blinked slowly. Maybe. Patricia looked away, and for a moment her grief seemed to slip, revealing something more practical beneath it. Columbo's voice remained soft. Mrs. Brennan, I was hoping you could help me with something. Patricia nodded cautiously. What? Columbo gestured toward the kitchen. That spare key. The one in the top drawer. Do you mind if I take it with me for a little while? Patricia's eyes widened. Why? Columbo smiled. Oh, it's silly. But I want to see if there's anything on it. Maybe a fingerprint. Maybe something. Patricia hesitated. Is that common? Columbo shrugged. In my line of work, Mrs. Brennan, everything is common eventually. Patricia swallowed. All right. She went to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and handed Columbo the key. He took it carefully, like it was delicate. Thank you, he said. I'll bring it back. Patricia's voice was quiet. Lieutenant, do you think someone else could have used it? Columbo looked at her gently. Who else knows where it is? Patricia hesitated. Just people who've been in the house. Columbo nodded. Like Martin Voss. Patricia's eyes flickered. Columbo's voice remained mild. Mrs. Brennan, has Martin Voss been in this kitchen? Patricia's lips tightened. Yes, she said. Of course. He's been here for years. Columbo nodded, as if confirming something. Okay, he said softly. That's all I needed. Patricia's gaze held his. What are you thinking? Columbo sighed. I'm thinking, if a door is locked from the inside, but there's a spare key, then it might not be locked from the inside at all. Patricia's face paled. Columbo quickly softened. Oh, now. Don't worry. I'm just thinking out loud. I do that. My wife says if I ever stop thinking out loud, she'll worry I'm dead. Patricia did not smile. Martin Voss sat in his office later that day, staring at a neat stack of papers he could not read. His thoughts returned again and again to Columbo's face, the rumpled coat, the apologetic smile, the harmless questions. There was something insulting about Columbo, and Martin could not decide whether the insult was intentional or accidental. In Martin's world, people either impressed you or they were invisible. Columbo did neither. He hovered. And hovering was dangerous. Martin reached into his drawer, pulled out a cigarette, Sobranie cocktail, and stared at it. He did not light it. He simply looked at it with the expression of a man realizing a detail he had once believed clever might now be fatal. He put the cigarette back. Then he picked up the phone and made a call. He spoke quietly, and when he hung up, his hands were still perfectly steady. But his eyes were not. By the end of the week, Lieutenant Columbo had done something very specific, something he did in nearly every case. He had made the killer feel as if the killer had to manage him. The killer began thinking not only about covering the crime, but about covering Columbo. And that, Columbo knew, was the beginning of the end. Because once a murderer starts living in a detective's head, the murderer starts making decisions for the detective. And Columbo loved it when criminals tried to do his job for him.